9th of June. Is it our first back from the break? No, we had one back from the break. You guys had an early break. I lose track. And Seeker really throws you off. And somehow the time changes. They're so minor going to the West Coast, but I never got over it over there, and now I'm all screwed up. So we've got some tests from Megan and Anna to look at. Megan's got her ass load of tests, as she put it. And Anna's got some revisions that we need to talk about. And actually, I'm going to start with something who I don't know if she'll show up, but we have some interesting things from Beth. So let me show you this, because now, we're sort of deep into stall, right? So we're really talked about, how the whole map works and all of that. And so, we come back down to the map and we've got our glossy region and our matte region, underfired, crazed, all of that. Okay. So everybody's sort of comfortable with how this whole thing works. The fact that it exists. What Beth has been working on is actually recreating the map. So she's specifically trying to find a yellow that I've had a history with. And the first thing that we wanted to do is that a lot of the yellows that she's trying to work with specifically are tied to strontium. And so because they are tied to strontium, we needed to figure out if strontium was working well, because we've had some problems with strontium in the recent past. So what I had her do as a first step is to just recreate the map using a now I forget if it was sodium or potassium. It doesn't really matter, but basically I think it was a sodium strontium map. And again, I just want to show this to you guys just sort of as a proof of concept that this whole thing works, and that it's not just, that I'm not just full of it. Because shockingly enough, when you look at this whole map, hey, look, here's glossy right through the middle. Then we have matte in this upper corner, and we can look at a few of these details in a second. And then we have dry and underfired down here. Now, she doesn't have a full map. She's just going from 0.2 alumina, 2.0 silica. So she's going from here to here, and then up to here. So she's just doing a smaller map, which is really where all of the glazes tend to fall. And, you sort of talked a little bit about how it's really difficult to get all these outer regions and all of that. But to come in here and to zoom into some of her details of what's really working. Right. So, just a few notes. Whoops. The first is low alumina levels. So, as we come down here, starting at 0.2, the first thing to note is, hey, look, these glazes are running. Even at 0.3, these are upside down, but they're running. And that's what cones tell us, right? That perfectly fits in cone theory. Lower amounts of silicon alumina means a lower temperature, which also equates to running. So we've got that coming in. The next thing is increasing silica and moving into the underfired region. So even at 0.2 alumina, as we move into higher silica levels, the glaze dries out. And shockingly enough, as we just add silica, the glaze dries out. And that's just because it's too much silica for the glaze to melt at all. Sorry, that's 0.3. So then this is 0.2. And this is just completely dry, whereas lower amounts of silica is completely glossy. The next thing to observe is crazing patterns, right? We talk about how on Stull, we've got this whole crazing region, right? All of the darker area. And shocking when we come back here, oh, look, we've got a crazing region that sort of swoops in and then clears itself up in the middle. Now, of course, it moves. It's always clay body dependent. But, the crazing gets bigger, which means the crazing is inherently going away. And even here that you watch the crazing go away and then it can emerge again. But, all those trends. The last one is the matte glazes, and matte glaze, matte glaze, matte glaze, matte glaze, and the purple line I put in here because that's the 5:1 silica to alumina ratio. I mean, there are other cool trends in there, like you can get crazing in a true matte glaze, of course, because it's a glass base with crystals growing in it. A true matte glaze can run because it's a glassy glaze with crystals growing in it, and all of that. So, really cool, just showing, and again, that this is strontium. Okay, so it's not just like this is calcium, and it's not that this is anything in particular. It's just that we have this interchangeability, and the map always recreates itself. And no matter what you hear, I mean, the one glaze talk that happened at NCECA this year, person got up and said, "Oh, well, barium makes matte glazes." No, that's garbage. That's just one of the great myths out there. And I watched, 1,000 people write in their notebooks, "Oh, barium equals matte," and like, no, that's garbage. It's just that barium mattes are really nice, but barium creates gloss, just like strontium creates gloss, just like calcium and every other thing. And so Stull really does become a sort of law of the land. Really, really cool results. So I just wanted to show you guys that, but do you have any questions? No. Okay, good. So this actually translates directly into how Anna is suffering right now. So Anna, let's look at your latest test. So Anna's got a gloss, and I forget whether we were talking about it privately or whether we were talking about it last week. But so you've got a glossy glaze working just fine. We did some color tests on it. Some good responses. Seems to fit pretty well on your clay body, all of that. But she also is developing a matte glaze. Okay, and so we'd been through several rounds of matte glaze testing. And again, this is at cone 6, and we found a few that she liked. And at the end of the day, she's going with this one, which is the number 4 glaze. The problem then arose this week that she started doing stain testing with them to do colors, and the glazes started to dry out. Does anybody know why?
Well, the stains have their own amounts of alumina or something.
Well, it's even worse than that. Your thinking is absolutely accurate, but it's worse than that because the stains are composed. The stains are basically inert, right, in the glaze. So they are, basically the term that we would throw around is refractory, which means they are not just not helping the glaze melt, but they are drying it out. And so, when you're doing a stain, do you remember what sort of percentages you had off the top of your head?
3 or 4.
Right. So as you add more and more stain, it's going to dry the glaze out more and more. And so, you get stuck in this place where, the more stain you add, the drier the glaze gets, even though it's melting and all of that. But the good news is that she's not completely up the creek. Okay. So we had talked about this before, but I just wanted to show everybody how to do this as a sort of working with glazes type deal. So here's the glaze she's working with, glaze number 4, right? And the glaze itself is pretty simple. Nephsi, whiting, EPK, and Frit 3124. So again, she's working at cone 6. And so we have 0.3 to 0.7, just like we'd like, a 4.25 to 1 silica to alumina ratio. So that ratio is actually pretty high when we talk about a matte glaze. The line is 5 to 1, but as you start to look at matte glazes, you'll find that even getting it down as far as 4 to 1 is pushing it pretty far. And that's great because it actually gives us a lot of room to move. Okay. Her alumina level's a little high, her silica level's a little high, but that's all fine. It's really nothing to be worried about. And her boron level is at 0.15, which we haven't really talked about boron levels. I think that's today's lecture, if I'm not mistaken, or it was last week's lecture. But we're getting to boron levels. But this is exactly where that needs to be. But the glaze is just too matte. Along with that, it's also having a slight crazing problem. Oh, I'm hearing myself through somebody. Or through myself. Anyway, so well, we've got a slight crazing problem, and we've got a cracking problem. But tweaking the formulas in general becomes pretty easy to do. Because to remove crazing, to make the glaze not so dry, all we really need to do is to add silica. Is anyone else hearing me in echo?
Yeah.
You all are? Okay. I'm gonna mute you, Jackie, just to see if does that go away? I think it went away. I was hearing it through. Anyway, okay, it went away. Can you guys all still hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, head shakes. Okay. So we've got a 4.25 to 1 silica to lumen ratio, which puts us right here on the map, which is great. But what we need to do is we need to back off of that a little bit. Now, there are two things we could do. One, we could reduce the total amount of glass formers while keeping the ratio the same. So we could take some clay out of this formula, and that would juice it up a little bit more. That's a fine option, but I don't really want to go there because what that's going to do is it's actually going to move us farther back into the crazing region. And since she's already getting crazing, we don't want to do that. Okay. So we're going to keep the alumina level the same, which means we're not going to touch the clay. And so from a UMF perspective, the next thing we can do to manipulate the glaze is just add in flint. Okay. Adding in silica. What this is going to do is it's just going to move us to the right of the map. Okay. And because this axis is silica, flint is pure silica. So by adding silica, all it does is add more silica to where we are. Now, we just want to make subtle steps. We still want to stay under 5 to 1, but we'll make a couple of tweaks here and we'll just see where it goes. Because during her initial testing, I don't think I have the formula, but she stopped at, or we stopped at 4.25 to 1. So we're just going to explore that a little bit more. So literally to do this, you just take your original formula as is. So here's our original formula, Nefsi, Whiting, EPK, and 3124. And we just start adding flint. Now, how much flint do we want to add? I don't know. I have no idea. All I know is I want to get a silica to alumina ratio slightly higher than where we are. Now, we could go in big jumps, we could go in small jumps, but, you know, we'll just see. So let's just plug in a number. Let's just say 5 silica, okay? So we had 5 silica, and we went to 4.69 to 1. Again, from 4.25, that's a bit of a big jump for me because we were trying to find some real subtle changes because we're only going as high as 5 to 1. So 5's a bit much, so let's just try 2. If my enter key worked. Come on. Spilled iced tea on my keyboard right before I left, and now it's acting all screwy. 2. Okay. 4.43 to 1. Even that is a little bit high. Come on. 1 point. Oh, come on. 1.5. On. Sorry, my keyboard's acting squirrely. Try plugging it in and see if that makes it any better. Did the batteries die? 1.5. There we go. Okay. So we've gone up from 4.25 to 4.38. And I like that. That's a small enough jump. It's not huge. So I'm just going to set that as 0.1. Okay. So this is my new 0.1. And I've already got my date adjusted. So this is 329.17. And then the Katzberg 1. So I'm just going to take this formula. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to move over to the second sheet. And I'm going to paste the new formula here. Right click and then the paste values. And I'm gonna adjust it again. So this time I'm gonna try 2.5. Right. And I'm just gonna go for a 4.5. That's close. Again, I can get picky, so I'll try 2.6. And not quite there. Let's just jump up to 3. 3 is too far. 2.75. 2.8. Nice round numbers. Okay, so that's perfectly fine, you know, again, and I'm just going to make a couple of these jumps. So again, you take the formula, go to the next page, and we're going to paste it. So again, now I'm at 4.5. I want to try like 4.65. I'm going to take this up to 4. 4.62. I'm going to try 4.5. Too high, 4.3. And again, I'm just trying to make gradual steps. I don't even care what the numbers really are, because I just want to find what happens when I make these changes when we run these tests, because it's going to go from the high density mat that it currently is to a satin, but it will also mean it'll get rid of crazing, and it should not be so dry when she adds the stains. So we were at 4.64, so I'm going to try 5.5. Good enough. And again, I'm not even really picky as to what these numbers are. I'm just putting together a new series here just to give her different options. Try 7. That's a little high. Oh, wait, no. I was at 7.5. Let's try 6.5. 4.86. So that's good. And then we'll do just one more in here. Pay special. And we'll do like a 4.93. So we'll do a 7. 7.5. So these are really subtle changes, but they will create a lot of variation. So when you start to come in and look for tweaking a glaze and nudging a glaze, these couple of percentages and fractions of a percent really do make a big difference as to the final performance. So I'm just going to go and delete these because these aren't relevant at all. These are copying the spreadsheet from before. So now we've got, what, 6 tests here? Yes, we've got 6 new tests that you can try just to tweak that formula ever so slightly. So hopefully it should get rid of the crazing, and it should get rid of the dryness on the color. Does that all make sense? Hannah, do you have any questions?
No. Oh, the lavender and the pink mason stains, they particularly matte out, I noticed, even like my gloss glazes.
The
But
pink.
the lavender, I didn't use the pink in this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's every stain. Different stains have different compositions.
Yeah.
And so the complexities of stains we'll talk about later. But yeah, they're gonna react to the glazes differently, dry some out. Some will dry out more, some will dry out less. But hopefully by juicing up the glaze just a little bit, it shouldn't be so bad. And then finally, you had this cracked. Now, let's see. Did you say you had multiple pots that had this?
This was the only one. It might have been a cooling crack. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, if that happens again, we can watch out for it.
Mm-hmm.
It does look like there's a little bit of surface tension with the glaze moving just a hair down here,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which,
it's probably thickest on that one.
right, that could cause a problem. It ends up being sort of a body problem, but I guess I'd say if it happens again, we can address it. But right now, I wouldn't be too concerned. It also looked, well, I feel like it was happening before the glaze went on. Is there a ridge in the glaze, or is the glaze smoothed over the crack?
What do you I don't
Like
the
if you look
crack
at,
from the piece kind of went into the glaze.
yeah, it would be more rough.
Mm-hmm.
If it was if it was just from the body. What is my computer doing? Anyway, just keep an eye out for it in the future. Did anybody else have a problem joining? Christina says she can't get in. Hold on one second. Nobody else had any problems getting in? Nope. Hold on. Let me email Christina real quick. Okay. So let me email you these variations. Like I said, they're pretty simple. And I'll send them to you right now. But so when we're talking about now of sort of getting towards glazes and manipulating glazes, that's the sort of thing, we have to work with. And it really does just come down to manipulating silicon alumina once you've established your fluxes, your flux ratio, your flux selection. Okay, so there you go. Now you have those formulas. And we then have Megan. What? Megan has the ass load of tests. She has got so many tests, and we're really talking about application here. So I counted. It looks like it's 190 tests if I counted right, which is great. There is so much data here, and there's only one I really want to talk about, but we'll get there in a second. Do you have any observations or any questions at this point, Megan?
Not really. I think the spray tests turned out, I think those were the worst.
Mm.
I don't know, they were just weird, but
let's see. So we've got the 3 glazes you've been working with for a little while now, right? And fired at cone 10 and cone 6. And then we've got the different application methods. So we've got brush, dip, and spray. So let's look at glaze number 9. I really like some of these results. So glaze number 9, just looking at it from the start, NEFSI, MagCarb, zinc, and EPK. So it's a combination of the zinc and MagCarb split pretty much evenly, since we've been looking at both working with magnesium carbonate for making the crawling happen and at zinc. And the zinc alone has been pretty fussy, which is interesting because usually that's a real game change or a winner there, but that's okay. So nothing particularly special in the formula. Higher alumina levels, fair amount of clay. We'll talk about that again here in a second. But generally, they're always staying in the matte region for any of these glazes. So when we come in here with brushing, as we build up layers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers, right, we can start to see how the crawling changes, and really fascinating changes as thickness becomes an issue. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I just love the transition. As they start to get thicker and thicker, and they really become sort of buttons. And even at the lower temperatures, you're still getting it. But you can start to see the contrast of how well the samples are melting, or sort of the melting progress at the lower temperature. Like these are harder and these are smoother and all of that kind of thing. So that's a pretty cool transition. What I really like, though, so then we come into the, so that was the glaze number 9. So here we go. So I'm sorry, this was brush, right? And this, loving this thick brushed running. So you're getting globules, but then they're so thick they're running on top of it. And that's sort of amazing. I mean, that's sort of like this wonderfully mucusy glaze. And that's sort of great. And so that's pretty cool, sort of looking how it builds up to that. On the dip, you're getting a more effective coating because we'll talk about this in an upcoming lecture, but it's really all about the shrinkage, and getting the dry glaze to shrink and crack is what causes the effect. And then as it melts, it just forms little islands. And then in the spray, yeah, we're not getting a lot of the crawling, and we get some, and it's slightly different. And what's really cool is we'll talk about spray application in a little bit, because spray is very interesting because these glazes exist because the particles don't pack particularly well when you apply the glaze. Okay, the zinc in the MgO makes it so that the physical particles that make up the wet glaze just do not pack efficiently, combined with a lot of clay makes them shrink a lot. Okay, what's interesting about the spray is that the spray makes tiny little beads, right? So when you when the glaze hits the air, right, in the spray gun, it just turns it into tiny little beads. Well, those beads actually pack pretty well, and so it overcomes the poor packing of the brush application, or the dip application. And so it's nowhere near extreme. And in fact, in the lower layers, I mean, up through 4 passes, you're still getting a pretty even, consistent coat. And it's not until the 5th pass where it begins to move at all. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it starts to really change. So that's pretty cool. And then glaze number 10, this is the pure zinc one. And yeah, this one is certainly dry and fussy. Shouldn't be quite this dry, but I certainly can understand why it's dry. And again, it's just not melting, but you can sort of see this is the whole shrinking, cracking procession through here. And then this one, interesting enough, in the spray, it melted more efficiently, actually, because it's packed better. So that's pretty cool. And then you've got the whole lineup. Beautiful stuff. Brush, dip, spray on glaze number 2 at cone 6. Brush, dip, spray on glaze number 2 at cone 10. Love it. Great documentation. Although we do have to talk about one thing. You're out of focus. We might have to recapture these images because we really need a tighter focus. Like they're sort of fuzzy. But the data is great. The application is great. I mean, look at these transitions. Like this is great stuff. I mean, this is all beautiful information here. Like, I love it. You did it. We got snot. That's a whole new thing coming in here. Like, this is great. Like, I hope you're very proud of yourself. Your ass load of glazes came out exceptionally well, but probably need to rephotograph them. Okay. And then we also have some new variations, which I do want to talk about. But actually, before I get there, do you have any questions about that, Megan? About your big load of tests?
No, I just used my scanner that I have on my printer, so I'd have to take them up to the 5th floor, which is what I was doing.
Yeah. I know it's a pain in the ass, but it's worth it for the documentation. You've got so much good stuff here. We don't want to lose it just because the images are meh.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just go and knock them out on the scanner really quick. And they'll be beautiful. But yeah, your scanner couldn't quite tell where to pull focus. So just clean it up, but your layout is great. Your process was great. Your firings are great. Like great. We just need to make sure that the results match that. And then we did one more round of tweaking, and I'm sort of loving the tweaking going on because what I wanted to try was some things like, so from a UMF perspective, right, what's going on in these glazes? Let's zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so we've got NEFSI, zinc, EPK. Actually, let me go back to your first one. And clay. Okay, so from a chemistry perspective, these glazes aren't like, they're not crazy. Let's go to this one. Okay, so NEFSI, mag carb, zinc oxide, and EPK. From a UMF perspective, they're 0.3 to 0.7. The alumina level is 0.5. Like, none of this is crazy, right? This is all sort of in the standard working regions that we've talked about. What's different is that the silica to alumina ratio is pretty low. So we were just looking at Anna's tests, and they were like 4.25. Well, this is all the way down at 3.83 to 1. So this is a very low silica to alumina ratio, which means it's got a lot more alumina than silica. And in some of the previous rounds of testing, we tried adding more silica, and the crawling goes away. The glaze starts to melt more efficiently. But we also have our flux selection, and that's in the form of mostly magnesium and or zinc. And in particular, in glaze 9, we balanced magnesium and zinc together. Okay, because both of them crawl. That's sort of what we've been looking at through the semester is how does magnesium crawl versus how zinc crawls, and then try combining the two of them. So when you combine mag carb or magnesium and zinc in a low silica to alumina ratio with a high alumina level, you get crawling. Okay, so that's the nature behind it. And really what it comes down to is to get this high of an alumina level, you've got 20% clay with zinc and mag carb. Okay, and clay shrinks. That's really where the shrinkage comes in. Just the mag carb and the zinc aren't helping. So just as a conceptual basis, that's what you've been working with. That's why we keep dealing with mag carb and zinc. So what we tried on this last round right here is to try messing with the formula a little bit. Now, the first thing I had you do was, instead of going for just straight up clay, okay, we worked with calcined kaolin. Now, calcined kaolin has been fired, and so it loses its chemically bound water, but it also loses its shrinkage. Okay, so what we were really trying to look at is is it the alumina in the clay that causes the shrinking and crawling, or is it the the behavior of clay, the shrinkage of clay. So what we did is we added in a clay particle here in calcined kaolin that doesn't shrink. Okay. And what we found is, I mean, to me, this is a whole new variation in crawling. It's not shrinking as much, so we're not making islands that are quite as distinctive. So it's shrinking, but it's not shrinking that extreme. And to me, this sort of looks like quilting. And I'm sort of loving what's going on here. By cutting down the clay for calcined kaolin, you're cutting down that effect. So it really seems like it's the shrinkage of the clay that has the effect and not the silica and alumina in the clay. So we've got some more here with calcined kaolin, where what she's doing is it just silica? Right, where we're just adding in flint. So this is no flint, and this is adding in some flint, and then more flint. And you can watch, oops, that's too far. Through these tests, you can watch the crawls get smaller and smaller as you add silica. So like we just tweaked with Anna's glaze of adding silica, moving to the left on the map, well, we can watch the effect of crawling go away. You know, so again, it's really that lower silica level that creates that. Tried some more tests here with trying to add in some boron in the Frit of 3110. Doesn't look like it really particularly worked, but hey, sometimes we try things to see what happened. Then we did the same test in adding silica and alumina. And then eventually, you know, it did sort of start to melt, but it's underfired. The chemistry on this particular series is not working particularly well. Lots of little crawls here again, and we're just working with Frit 3110, just trying to juice the system a little bit, trying to get it to melt more at cone 6, but it doesn't seem like it was really extreme enough to get that to melt. And then again, trying to increase the levels a little bit more, and it doesn't really seem to be taking particularly well. Yeah. Slightly lower alumina level. Now we've got some better crawl. So again, correlation of silica and alumina level to melting temperature. Obviously 0.7 alumina is too much. 0.6 seems to be working okay, but the crawl itself is not melting exceptionally well. That's sort of neat. Very pebble-like. 0.6, a little bit more boron. So again, as we get into boron, which I believe is next week's talk, we'll talk about how it affects the melt. And that's a really important thing in how we manipulate temperature and the ability of a glaze to melt, but we're just not quite there yet. But again, everything else is staying the same. The flux ratio is the same. The alumina level's staying at a 0.6, and we're just adding in a little bit of boron, slight changes to the silica to alumina ratio corresponding to that. But, you know, interesting changes. Did you have any observations on these tests?
I think just the general trend was like the cone 6 had harder edges, and then the cone 10 were soft.
Right. And that's the way the whole system melts. Really, the cone 6 tests on these are just incomplete melts. So they just haven't finished melting. As they melt, the nodules don't disperse. They still stay. They just become softer and more rounded and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, all in all, great stuff. These, though, bring to mind what we should do next, which is really we should try different clay sources and to see how that affects how they shrink. Because now we've defined that it is the clay that makes it shrink. So we've pretty much just been working exclusively with EPK. So what if we try something crazy like a red art, you know, which is a really iron bearing clay? How's that going to affect it? How's, you know, an OM4 or an XX Sagar or any of those types of variables? So I think we'll come up with something like that. And let me think about that for a few days, and I will get you a new round of tests.
All right. Sweet.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Cool. Great stuff, though. I mean, kudos to you. You knocked it out. You did it. I gave you a lot of shit to do, and you made an ass load of glaze tests. So yeah, just yeah. My one request is to redocument them just to get them working a little bit better.
Okay.
Get the images working a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Is that it? Kyoshi, you're still working. We emailed. Jackie disappeared. She's still working. And Christina is not getting in. It sounds like she's having a browser problem. But I cannot fix that for her. Is anybody else? Is anybody else forced to update their browsers to get into Hangout today? No. Just Christina. Well, Christina, hopefully you're watching this in retrospect, and we will look at your test next week, and I will look at your tests, and we will talk about them privately. Okay, you guys, good stuff. Yeah. Anything else? Cool beans. Okay, so Anna, knock out those tests and let me see how well they work. Yes, thumbs up, Kyoshi. And the colors should all be the same. You should get exactly the same color response. It should just get rid of crazing and juice out the glaze just a little bit more. Okay, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal if you just knock out those 6 tests real fast and pick a new one, and hopefully it should be a little bit better. Okay. Alrighty, y'all. I will talk to you next week. Bye.